Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. Well, back by popular demand, and no kidding, I've had a lot of people email me and also comment on the site telling me to please get Dr. Jim Willie back on. And we have Dr. Jim Willie back on. Dr. Jim Willie, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Always a pleasure to be back, Greg.
You, of course, are the publisher of the Hat Trick letter, which can be found on goldenjackass.com. And I really appreciate you being here. And I want to just kind of, before I start asking you a question, tell you that you have been really, you've made some big calls, many big calls, and I can't enumerate them. But one of the things you've said in the last few months, just talking with me and your writings, that the U.S. would become increasingly isolated. And boy, we can't find anybody to help us bomb Syria. If that's not the definition of increasingly isolated, I don't know what else. Bravo on a really good call. You also said that this G20 meeting was going to be really important, not just on the economic front, but it looked like it's important on the political front as well, but particularly on the economic front. Let's start with the G20 and the press conference the president gave last week. I know you're not a political. I know you really are a nuts and bolts numbers guy, but you don't really follow the politics. But he's going to address the American public on Tuesday of this coming week, this week. That's tomorrow, and he's going to tell them why he's going to take action. Wants them to know, wants America to know what he's doing before he does it. Even though it looks like he's going to get up to 300 no votes in the House of Representatives. What's your assessment of Barack Obama and his bomb or not to bomb, it looks like bomb, Syria campaign?
Well, as you know, I don't get too embroiled in the politics. I regard him as a puppet, a Manchurian candidate, and a clown. I really don't pay much attention to what he has to say because you have to interpret all the lies. What I try to do is focus on what's really important and what he is reacting to, because the U.S. ship of state is sinking and it's a derelict vessel. I don't really care about approval for war actions because since Vietnam, since Nixon, since the War Powers Act, the United States has really been run by the White House and the military and the National Security Agency. They do whatever the hell they want. There's no congressional approval of war actions. There hasn't been in 30 years, so I don't give a good goddamn what they do in this congressional meeting.
All right, what kind of a message does that send to the world that we have 300 no votes in the House of Representatives? To you, this doesn't make any difference then? They're going to do whatever they want to do anyway.
I think they're going to do whatever they want to do anyway, yes. Unfortunately, Obama has backed himself in a corner. All these Iran sanctions and actions directed against the allies of Iran, the partners of Iran, the associates like India and Turkey, and now Syria, they've all backed him into a corner. Now he cannot gracefully step back and say, oh, no, military strikes are not a good idea. We don't want to rain 200 cruise missiles on Damascus. It wouldn't be constructive. He looks weak. He looks backed in the corner. He looks just like Bernanke, who has no exit strategy.
Very good correlation.
They're all tied together, Greg, because a lot of the actions out there are directed against the dollar, and the U.S. press and the U.S. White House and the U.S. congressional leaders, they've got an uncanny knack of describing and framing the Syrian problem as one of human rights, of chemical abuses, of innocent civilians being harmed. What about the harm done from food prices from the Fed's monetary policy? Syria, I'm sorry, we don't want to get to Syria right away, but all this is about Syria, and the G20 is now being diverted by Syria. But this G20 focus is really about the dollar policy and the Fed's monetary easing and bond purchases. The rest of the world doesn't want the dollar to be debased so thoroughly. They've got reserves. We invite the emerging nations to be industrial plants and be the fabrication plants for building things that are exported to the United States, brought into the United States. And then we screw them with monetary policy that wrecks their treasury bonds. They're worried sick over treasury bonds. They're worried sick over the price of food, the price of copper, the price of everything in their economies. And the U.S. tries to make Syria an issue over human rights. It's about the pipeline. It's about the pipeline from Iran. These are all about the pipeline. Cyprus, the bank confiscations, that was to try to stop Russia and the Gazprom integration and dependence in Western Europe, including England. This G20 it's a sideshow, but it's also a focal point. It's an opportunity for Putin to flip the bird at Obama. I believe Team Obama is sitting in the corner just being insulted every 5 minutes. I don't care whether it's St. Petersburg or Moscow. The U.S. is in an indefensible position both with war and monetary policy, which are both tied together.
Oh, well, that's a brilliant point. That utterly brilliant point. An indefensible monetary policy with war and monetary policy that are both tied together. Oh, that's a nugget, my friend. And the G20. Well, go ahead.
Let me add another nugget because you enjoyed this last time we
spoke.
Was
a nugget. That's a nugget.
Okay. It would be a big mistake for Team Obama to miss the G20 meeting, but it would be a worse mistake for them to attend it.
I think you said it's a big mistake for Obama to bomb, and it's also a big mistake for Obama not to bomb. I mean, we're full of bad choices. I mean, isn't that the definition of checkmate? If you do this, you're screwed. If you do that, you're screwed.
I'm glad you brought it up. I'm glad you brought it up, Greg, because this is global chess, and Putin is a chess master. Obama is seen as a rank amateur with checkers his game, just like Bush. This is not going to end well. Team Obama is receiving so many criticism. The isolation coming. It's about all policy. It's about the U.S. dollar policy. It's about the monetary policy from the Fed. It's about war policy. It's about pipeline obstruction policy. Since when is it constructive for the United States to block the pipeline from Iran to Pakistan? China needs that. Since when this is abuse of credit card as a policy by the United States. We run deficits and then say, screw you all. You can just buy treasury bonds because you have to. This is hidden vengeance. The world is objecting to vengeance against India and Turkey for support of Iran. We're obstructing capitalism and commerce. That's the problem.
I pitched you. I basically told everybody last week that you were going to be on. I had several people comment going, they can't wait for Jim Willie. I'm not kidding. I'm really not just buttering your bread here. A lot of people were just, waiting for this. And something that you brought up, and I talked about you saying that we were isolated and you made some big calls. Another big call you are making is at this G20 meeting behind the scenes. Forget about the window dressing of chemical weapons in Syria, to your point. That this G20 meeting behind the scenes is really important, and that what they're really doing is they're trying to put together a new alternative currency, and they can't just have a couple of countries do it. They have to have a lot of countries do it. So when this thing rolls out, many countries are going to have to do it, otherwise they're going to crash their economies. Their currency will be, if you have a gold-backed standard, your currency is going to be way high, and everybody else is going to be on the floor, so they need many people to get involved. Isn't this what's happening, in your estimation, by your sources, behind the scenes at the G20, actually the G19, because they're leaving the U.S. out? Isn't this what's happening in your estimation?
It's exactly what's happening in my estimation. Let me give as a preface that Team Obama has promised that the Fed will stop printing money to support bond monetization. They're promising the taper in the next few months. I think they said the next several months it would be tapered down. This is a lie. This is a basic, bold lie. If the Fed stops, I don't care if it's the Department of Treasury or the Fed, whoever is controlling the printing press right now, the contract is up for the Fed, and I'm not sure what their status is legally and contractually. But if the U.S. cannot find buyers in the legitimate bond market, it's going to have to print money somewhere in order to buy its own debt that's created into bonds through securitization. So expect the U.S. to be caught with lies, more lies, where they do print money to buy their own bonds, because if they don't, the sign will be that the interest rate on the 10-year doesn't just hit 3% like it almost did yesterday or the day before, last Friday, but it's going to head to 4 and then 5% if we make good on our promise to stop the bond monetization. All right, I think we're liars, and we're going to get caught in lying, and it's going to increase the isolation because no one's going to believe anything the United States government has to say. Now, critical mass is desired and required for any new valid asset-backed currency.
And that means, just to interrupt, that means a lot of countries have to sign on immediately so everybody's on the same playing field. Is that right? Critical mass?
Yeah. Yes. Just think that 2/3 of the countries of the world, 3/4 of the countries of the world, well over half the global GDP. I'm talking about the Eastern Alliance, as I call it, but it's the G20 nations, it's the BRIC nations, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Add on the group of Shanghai Co-op nations, which includes little stragglers like Venezuela. Add to that whatever other nation wakes the hell up. And that might include, say, Switzerland. I like to point out as a preface, another preface for this point about the critical mass, what happened to Switzerland 2 years ago when all the safe haven money went out of European locations and crawled into the Swiss hills, the land of yodels and Swiss cheese? The Swiss franc went up to about 130, 135 versus the euro. So what do? They instantly declared a peg, and they've been enforcing the 120 line versus the euro for 2 years. Why did they do that? Because they wrecked their export trade. The Swiss franc was the haven. It was seen as a protected place, not because it was gold backed, but because it maybe had, I think the main reason was it was not euro. The Swiss franc is a little rebellious outfit that doesn't follow the euro, doesn't follow the EU Commission, doesn't follow the Euro Central Bank. They go it alone. So a lot of European wealth went into Switzerland, and it caused some big problems. That's the sort of thing that would happen if a new currency were announced and only 3 nations, let's say India, Turkey, and China, and that's all there was. That's not enough. It's not a critical mass. And that's why the U.S. is pissed off at Korea and especially Japan for joining forces with China. They're basically saying, we'll go in with your Chinese yuan swap facility. That's your weaning device off the dollar. So now you got Russia in there, you got Australia in there, you got all these other countries, you got England with the swap facility, you got France, you got Switzerland, you got Germany. That's critical mass, Greg.
And don't they have to do it? This isn't just anti-American. They have to do it because they're killing the dollar. So they don't want to be stuck with these dollars and these treasury bonds. I mean, they have to do it as a form of financial survival. Do they not? This is not anti-American. This is survival, isn't it?
It is precisely survival. I said 4 years ago that nations need to depart from the dollar, and the first ones that do will be the survivors. The last ones will go to the third world. And that's what we're starting to see play out right now. It's happening in fast motion. This is no longer really, really slow. But take a look at some of the vengeance actions that the U.S. is secretly doing. There's a special currency market. It's not the Forex, but it's where a lot of rupee trading takes place for India. India has been trying now for the last several months to have gold collateralized credit extension within their banks. That's a measure toward a gold currency. You know, you can always talk about, well, how much is the money supply going up? Well, you got to look at how much credit went up.
Yeah.
So credit and new money are hand in hand. Well, in India, they got a different kind of system. They got hallmark jewelry, where just think of it as certified jewelry. It's got a certain mark on it, label, what do you call it, brand, and it's got a certain type. It might just be, a certain name and a certain model, and that's a very popular necklace, and it's worth $25,000. All right, you can borrow against that by putting it up as collateral to the bank. The U.S. doesn't like that. They don't like anything like that. So they attack everything like that. And the rupee is down 25% in its exchange rate, and price inflation is ravaging India to the point where the suicide rate of peasant farmers has gone up tenfold.
Well,
this is U.S. foreign policy.
I want to bring that back home. Now, what happens if the dollar, and we have critical mass, and so people can grasp this, a short little primer on what happens to the dollar if they reach critical mass and two-thirds of the world stops using the dollar or curtails dramatically using the dollar. Russia, China, India, Turkey, even the UK, France, all these countries say, yeah, we can't use the dollar, or we'd like to use a lot less of it. What happens here at home to America, to Americans?
Well, the actual buzz out there is that the Chinese might have a gold-backed yuan. Central Europe, namely Germany and its buddies like the Netherlands and Austria and Finland, those are their main buddies. They might develop a gold-backed Nordic euro. Even though I've got a new forecast page on my public website where it's 17 correct forecasts in the last 5 years and 2 errors, the voice has told me that your error really is just a delayed and hidden correct forecast, so it's really going to be 18 and 1. The Nordic euro is coming. It's been delayed by things like Cyprus. It's been delayed by a lot of different hubbub in the European Commission. The third country that's talked about as having a gold-backed currency is the United States, amazingly. They're going to possibly call it the U.S. Treasury dollar. But it's not going to solve anything for the United States because they're stuck. They're stuck with too much debt in the Treasury bonds. You can't have a new viable gold-backed dollar and just say to the rest of the world, hey, we know you got 16 or 17 trillion dollars and maybe a good half of that is sitting in your banking systems, and we're just going to say F you. Sorry about that, but we got a good dollar now, and by the way, we need to borrow some more money. Would you like to lend us some money after we just declared your treasury bonds worthless?
What a colossal mess. People have no idea what is coming down the pipe. You're talking about the vaporization of the current Federal Reserve note dollar system is what you're talking about.
And the vaporization of the foundation of many different foreign nations' banking system based in treasury bonds. That's why they're having an urgent call now to get rid of and diversify from their treasury bonds. What's going to happen to the United States? I don't give a hoot about this U.S. Treasury dollar because the U.S. government leaders are putting in a condition that anything on a reset, a currency global reset, must wash away all U.S. government debt, and the rest of the world is laughing in their faces. So what's going to happen in the United States is they're going to have to split and make their own dollar, and I don't think it's going to be gold-backed. They're just going to have to take the current dollar with its current backing in treasury bonds. That's the subtle, implicit foundation of the U.S. dollar in its current status, the treasury bond. It's debt-backed. It has vapor, it has arrogant hot air from politicians, has military might, but it has treasury debt also behind that dollar. They're going to have to devaluate the dollar, Greg. I think it's going to be 30%, then another 30%. And just divide that percentage by 2, and that's going to be your sudden shock on price inflation. In other words, 30% sudden devaluation of a split dollar, where foreigners, just think Singapore, Hong Kong, Panama, Switzerland. They've got a lot of dollar accounts. They're going to say, screw you. We're not going to devaluate. We have dollars. You devaluate your own stinking dollar. You go ahead with your own stinking monetary policy to debase your own stinking toxic dollar. And the United States is going to have to devaluate. If it's 30%, then 15% sudden inflation. Bang, just like that.
And then everybody will be paying 15%, and then they'll do another 30%, so you'll get another 15% inflation, and then so you'll get a good 30-40% inflation, boom, just in a short amount of time.
Yeah, and $6 gasoline and $6 gallon of milk, and a lot of problems, and I think we're going to see violence in 3 different supply centers. And you know, this is one reason they want to collect the guns and to collect the bullets and all this. They don't want to have the U.S. and its citizens in a position for just outright mayhem, chaos, and civil disobedience and civil war. It's going to be gas stations for the gasoline, supermarkets for the food, and ATM machines for the cash.
It'll be chaos.
They're all going to be sites for violence.
All those are violence centers. Grocery stores, gas stations, and ATMs. Violence centers.
I think so. I think so because the U.S. is going to be caught in a corner where they're going to have to devaluate their own currency as the rest of the world says, screw you, we have a foreign dollar. Go ahead and ruin your domestic dollar. A big split is coming, and it could come as soon as, I don't know, I've heard stories about October. The U.S. is going to call home all dollars. Well, gee, that's an invitation for the foreigners to say, screw you, we've already got a foreign dollar. Go ahead and make your own domestic dollar, then wreck it.
Jim, Willie, in closing, I just want to bring up that correct forecast page. I have you on because I think a lot of you, I've been reading you since, I don't know, the 2005 when I was at CNN. I'm at CNN and I'm thinking, who is this Jim Willie? Who is this doc? He's got PhD in statistics from Carnegie Mellon. This is a real guy. He's making all these predictions. And as I followed you, your predictions kept, turning up correct. Other people like Jim Sinclair and Sprott and all these people who are credentialed people and who are smart people weren't on the mainstream media, but you guys were all right in every aspect of what you were talking about. And I want to talk about your page. You have 17, maybe 18 correct predictions on your free site. This is your free page, right?
Yes.
And you only have one loser. I know you have the Hat Trick letter, which you sell, a subscription service. I know it's a good publication. I was actually a subscriber for a long time of your letter. Actually, I'm not endorsing you, but I will say you gave me a couple of tips that helped me financially on your subscription service. But anyway, not an endorsement because I am a journalist. But I will say that this is on your free part of the site that you work on, that goldenjackass.com. Just give me a couple other big things that came true. Just a couple of your 18.
Oh gosh, there's just so many.
Well, just give me one of the big ones that you're most proud of.
Well, I called the insolvency of the U.S. banking system back in 2006. I called the Dubai. I thought it was going to be somewhere in the United Arab Emirates or the Persian Gulf. The Dubai credit bust and the sovereign immediately following. I thought we were going to see the weakest elements of Southern Europe fail in their debt, but. The other ones following that were really important was I said that once we're going down to 0% or so, and we're never going to leave 0%.
I remember that. I remember reading that and going, how can we do that? Well, you said that the QE would go on; it would not stop, and this was after QE1.
We're going to do some bond monetization, and once it starts, it'll go on forever. I called it no exit strategy and QE to infinity, and that's now been proved correct.
Yes, sir.
I thought that the government deficits would go over $1 trillion and stay over $1 trillion year after year. I said that in 2009. There have been a number of recent ones that are kind of strange. I said that we're going to see a growing spread between the COMEX paper gold price and the physical price, and now you're seeing the arbitrage from price premiums all over the place. But there are a number of weird little ones, too, like after the earthquake event was fabricated in Japan in March of 2011, I said, look for a fast move in the Japanese yen to 125. After the London whale incident came out, in May of 2012, that was last year, I said, look for them to force a very strong rally down to 1.5% in U.S. Treasuries. It might go down to 1.0, but it did not. It went to 1.4. But that was correct. And then I said also in 2011, the irrelevance of the group of 8, the G8 nations, and the ascendance of the G20. So there have been a lot of them. My newest ones that are pending have to do with global dumping of treasury bonds, the death of the petrodollar, the fall of the House of Saud, Saudi Arabia, and the split of the U.S. dollar into a domestic version and foreign current version.
And
a lot of things.
One last call. One last thing. So people are going to say, why didn't you ask him about gold and silver? So I'm going to ask you, what's your call on gold or silver? Being we're going to lose the petrodollar status, that they'll be trading oil and yen and yuan in this new currency or whatever. They'll be trading in all kinds of other currencies. What happens to to gold and silver in this scenario in your pitch?
I think it's going to get extremely confusing, even to people who get a lot of correct forecasts. I think we're going to see the dollar go up, 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 and then die. And while this happens, it'll be partly fueled by rising interest rates. But gold is going to come out of the ashes. I really don't pay a lot of attention. I give you an honest-to-God answer. If you ask me, how many times have you checked the gold price on the COMEX since April 1st? I would say under 15 times. I check it once every 2 or 3 or 4 weeks right now. That's how irrelevant it is. What I care about is how much are Russia and China building their gold reserves. How much are Turkey, Iran, and India trading on a net basis in gold? Because these are the foundations for a gold-backed new trade system. And it will supplant the dollar. It will supplant the banks. We've got way too much SWIFT code, weapon usage in banks. We got way too many sanctions where legitimate European companies cannot do business or bank with the major banks in Iran. The whole world is going to be moving toward a different system. It's going to be a lot more like a distributed system as opposed to the concentrated big bank system where all dollar trade goes through the Federal Reserve, all dollar wire transfers go through the Federal Reserve. It's a massive chokehold. The world doesn't want it anymore. So as the new system comes on, we're going to see gold suddenly move to 3,000. And we might see a month where you won't even know what the gold price is because it's not going to be posted. Why would the COMEX post a gold price if they don't have a gold contract?
So let me ask you this, and I've said this before.
Inventory.
Go ahead. I've said
the
this
COMEX
before.
is going to have empty inventory, along with J.P. Morgan. Empty inventory means no gold futures contracts, cash and carry only. And if they don't have any gold, they're not going to have any cash and carry. They're not going to have a price. We're going to see gold price go dark. I don't know when. It's going to be in the near future. I don't know when. I'd love to know when. But we're going to have a strange system, Greg. It's coming in a few months, several months, where there might be 4 or 5 critical global centers that trade gold legitimately. They're all going to post their price. It's not going to be the same. They're going to average it just like LIBOR. And that's when you're going to see the dust settle, a $3,000 price for gold. A few months later, a $5,000 price for gold. And nations like the United States scrambling to find some gold, confiscating from gold mining companies, which I still do not like, going with their buddies, the major gold companies, just confiscating them, using narco money to buy them out, narco money to buy out all the little exploration companies, doing everything they can in a major confiscation, not of individuals' gold, but of corporate mining gold. And then you're going to just see an amazing thing happen. We're going to see, after it goes to 5,000, it's going to go quickly. Remember how quickly the Dow Jones Industrial Index in the mid-90s? Oh my gosh, we just hit 3,000. Oh my gosh, just a few months later we hit 4,000. Oh my gosh, look at this. 4 months later we're up to 6,000. And Greenspan's talking about irrational exuberance. The same thing is going to happen with gold. But it's not going to be irrational exuberance. It's going to be a return of the gold standard. Because that is the problem. That's why we're not getting any solutions for this financial crisis. We have resistance to go back to the gold standard.
And so what I say to my readers, because I don't sell gold on the site. I don't sell anything. I have Google ads. That's really all I have. And I don't have any control over that either. But what I tell people about buying precious metals is that I'm not a trader, and I don't think gold and silver should be a trade. It should be all about possession, not about price. So either you have it or you do not. Forget the price is immaterial, whether it's the 1,200 or 1,500 or 1,900. Do you have it or do you not? Do you have protection or do you not? Is that a good way to look at it? Am I telling people the right thing?
Yes, exactly, and that includes the bullion banks for the very wealthy people in Central and Northern Europe. They're banging on the doors for the bullion bank managers now, saying, "Where's my gold? I got $160 million worth of family money gold here, and you're telling me I can't look at it." So it's going to be all about possession. But as I close, Greg, let me just remind people that the Syrian issue is about Gazprom. It's about the Russian gas company called Gazprom that's now developing a global monopoly. What Saudi Arabia is to OPEC, Russia is to Gazprom, and a new organization called the Natural Gas Co-op. It needs a better name. I'm just calling it the Nat Gas Co-op. It's run by Gazprom and the Kremlin. Notice that the Russian prime minister, and he swapped places with the president, it was Dmitry Medvedev. He was the CEO of Gazprom. That's how tight the Kremlin is with Gazprom. So the Cyprus attack, I believe, was not about model for bail-in. I think it was about a threat. If you if the governments force accounting, proper accounting, and stop accounting fraud, if the governments force proper capitalization and remove the capital shortfalls, then the big banks are going to fall, and the big banks now have a threat that they're going to confiscate private citizen wealth. So we won't get that. We're not going to get that. It was a veiled attack on the other big bank in Cyprus called Gazprom Bank. They're trying to stop the proliferation of Gazprom pipelines that's going to supply Western Europe. And as Israel is part of this, the Tamar platform, the Tamar floating platform, it's a gas producer. It's got a huge amount of surplus. It was committed in May or so to Gazprom. Israel is now a subject to Gazprom. Several months ago, England signed a contract for winter gas supply from Gazprom. Now we got Iran trying to get a connection to Syria for a Mediterranean port to feed the Western European market with Gazprom gas. If the Gazprom pipelines include Syria and continue to build out, they're not just going to China and Northern Europe, they're going all through Western Europe. The U.S. is losing the pipeline politics war. If Western Europe becomes a guaranteed captive of Gazprom as a customer, it will turn its back on the United States. And there's one more method of isolation for the United States. You're going to see phone calls like what we saw last week. I believe we saw last week. I think the Kremlin made a phone call to England and Cameron and said, back off on military support of a U.S. strike in Syria. I think it was because of natural gas and Gazprom. And clownish analysts come up with something like, oh, the British are unsure of their, consciences and doing the right thing. Oh, it's a bunch of hokum. Hokum. Since when does the British care about bombing civilian locations like in Oslo, Norway in late 2010? That was over the Norwegian big pension fund not participating with London support in the banks. Oh, and once again, the lone crazy gunman. Oh, gosh. What stupid morons are listening to the lone gunman stories that continue? British got a phone call from Putin and the Kremlin about Gazprom supply. And as Western Europe becomes more locked into Gazprom's supply for natural gas through additional pipelines, look for them to say to the United States, we really don't need your crap anymore. And we don't need your dollar anymore. And we don't need your banking hegemony anymore. We don't want your SWIFT codes anymore. We don't want your corporate executives over here. We don't want your World Bank anymore. We don't want your IMF anymore. We don't want your Pentagon defense contractors anymore. We don't want your NATO bases here anymore for heroin distribution. That's what's coming. Syria is about Gazprom and natural gas, captive Western Europe.
Dr. Jim Willie, a fantastic interview. I'm sure people are going to love this. You, of course, are the editor of the Hat Trick Letter. It is a paid subscription. You can find it on goldenjackass.com. Thank you very much for joining us today on usawatchdog.com.
My pleasure as always. Thank you.